Today, I'm going to tell you the truth about investing in real estate in 2026. The game has changed. This is a way different market. There's a lot of stuff going on, and the business has changed completely. And today, I'm going to tell you really what you need to do in order to be successful in this business in 2026. And I'm going to tell you some of the changes so you can hopefully adapt with the changes and still be relevant. So, if you're not familiar with who I am, my name is Greg, and I've been a full-time investor now for 10 years. I've seen a lot of different real estate markets. When I got started 10 years ago, it was way different, not even close to what it is like it is right now. So I have seen so many different things over the 10-year career I've had in this business, and boy, oh boy, 2026 real estate investing is a lot different, and you need to change the way you go about things, or else the market might beat you up pretty good. So if you get value from this video, if you could subscribe to my channel if you're not already subscribed, and you could like the video, that would really mean a lot to me. And if you are listening to this on a podcast platform, if you can share the show with somebody who you think needs to hear this. So let's get started. What is different about 2026 real estate investing? I'm going to talk about the obvious, and then I'm going to go slowly down from the obvious to the not so obvious. So first thing I'm going to talk about is competition, right? What do I mean by competition? I mean the amount of other people who are trying to do what you are trying to do in your same market, right? Back in 2015, there wasn't a lot of competition. Any market, there was maybe a few guys doing it or girls doing it. And if you did marketing, you were guaranteed to get a return, even if you were terrible at talking to people. You could have sent 2,000 postcards out and gotten a couple deals from it because nobody else was doing it, and there was no competition, there was no saturation. And, you didn't have to deal with competing with different buyers. I mean, if the seller called you, you were pretty much going to buy that deal at whatever price you wanted. And it was crazy. It was like you pretty much didn't have to do anything. And there was no other bidders that you're bidding with, because the whole thing with direct to seller marketing is that, back in like 2016, 2015, the auctions got too competitive. The MLS got too competitive. So people started going direct to seller. And the first people who started doing that were cranking. They were crushing. They were getting a 10 to 20x return on their marketing spend. And that was with mailers and some Google, and then calling came into play, and then text messaging came into play. And the whole business has just evolved. Now there's a lot of competition with every channel. I mean, there's a lot more investors who are trying to fight for the same deal. So you need to understand that when you're competing with an investor or multiple investors, usually, you need to understand first thing, is that seller literally going for the highest price? And is that the only thing they care about? Because if that's the case, unless you want to pay the most, don't even waste your time. Now, if you're competing against maybe one or two other buyers, that's where you can stand out, and you can still get the property lower than the other people if you build enough credibility, trust, and rapport with the owner, and they want to sell to you for less money because they know, like, and trust you better. So that's one thing I've seen. It is way competitive now. Any marketing channel we're doing, they're calling 3 buyers from cold calling, from texting, from mailers. Obviously online, that's always been notorious for saturated competition, but you got to understand, you got to be on your game, and you got to have a really dialed in process to talk to sellers, or else you're going to get your lunch eaten. And another thing I'll tell you about competition is that not only are there more people in pretty much every market doing this, but your speed on getting back to the owner is so important. Like, if you're not calling that seller back basically on the spot, you don't even have a chance. We just lost out on an opportunity the other day because we spoke to the seller. Seller had a conversation with our lead manager. In between that phone call and when I was going to call her back to set the appointment, she already sold the house. As I like to say, that's baseball. So competition is the first thing that's changed. The second thing is similar to the competition. I think the competition flooding the market with advertising has kind of turned into the second thing, which is the overall, I guess, appeal of a cash offer is no longer unique, right? It's not like no one's ever heard of that. So, for example, back in the day, a cash offer on your house was kind of weird, and it was kind of rare. Like, people were like, whoa, a cash offer. Someone will actually buy my house cash? That's crazy. I never even heard of that. Now it's like every freaking where you look, there's somebody advertising buying houses. So in the seller's mind, they all know that they have a lot of options. Now, back in the day, that did not happen. They were like, I'm going to deal with this guy because he said he'll buy my house, and I'll sell my house to him. Now it's like, well, what cash buyer do I want to sell to? Because there's 14 in my local market. So basically, the whole idea of a cash offer, the value of it and I think allure of it has dwindled quite a bit. And now it's just like, yeah, you sell your house for cash. You could sell your house to an investor for cash, or you can list your house. But it's like, it's not a novel concept now. So, when the sellers are talking to you, they kind of know that you're just one of the other cash buyers and there's a million of them. So, they're not assigning as much value to a cash offer at times. So the whole marketing about what you do needs to change, because if you're just marketing, I'll buy your house cash, you're just going to blend in like everybody else. So you need to be different with how you market to people, and you need to speak to people where they are. You don't want to come out as a cash buyer because they can find 20 of them in one zip code. But if you come out and you're like, hey, I buy properties from people who usually deal with this, and this, maybe I can help you, that may speak better to the owner than just some random cash buyer making them an offer. So you gotta be better with your marketing. You gotta stand out more. You gotta have more of a branding presence, even though branding in this business is like hit or miss depending on how you're marketing. But the second thing that's changed, to summarize it, is the allure and the appeal of a cash offer has just basically diminished because of the level of competition. So basically, thing number 2 is directly correlated to thing number 1. Now, let's get into the third thing that's changed, and that is the market itself. The actual real estate market, the economics of supply and demand has changed. And now it's 2026. We've had high interest rates for 3.5 years, almost 4 years. So we've had 4 years of high interest rates, where the problem with that is that the affordability of a property is not really affordable now to the average person. So back in 2021, when COVID was going on, the interest rates were 3%. So the purchase prices were a lot higher because the interest rate was so low and the payment was the same. So what you saw was like 2020, 2021, 2022, the market shot up like crazy. I mean, it was like if you didn't sell your house over the weekend, you completely flopped. And now it's like if you sell your house in a month, you're pretty good. So the overall market has changed, right? The supply and demand has changed, and it's gotten so micro, and I'm saying micro, I mean like each market has its own sub-markets. Like for example, in Seattle, you can still do a lot of deals here. You can flip properties and sell a house in a weekend, but it's got to be in the right neighborhood. It's got to be done the right way. It's got to be priced accordingly, and you really need to know your inventory levels, because you could be in the same market, Seattle, you could have a property, and there could be a ton of same inventory sitting on the market. And the only way to stand out there is to way lower the price and list it lower than everyone else, which would hopefully attract an offer right away. So the actual demand for houses, and I can't say it's dried up everywhere because it hasn't, has changed. And you really need to know the sub-markets within your market, right? A better example, I would say, would be like the New York area. Flipping properties in the core Hudson Valley, Wappingers Falls, Middletown, Poughkeepsie, Newburgh, the demand there is strong. There's going to be multiple offers if you price it right. Now, if you start going out farther into the country, no matter where you are, there's going to be more inventory sitting. There's going to be higher days on market. Those houses aren't going to be selling in a weekend. And the thing here in 2026, the big mistake I see, and I've felt guilty of this once or twice, is that if you don't price your property well, if you're flipping it, which is what I do a lot of, you will pay the price with a house sitting on the market, which is ultimately going to cost you hard money payments or private money payments and taxes and insurance. And the longer you hold the house, most likely the less money you're going to make. So you got to realize that you need to be really good with your pricing strategy, and you need to understand, and if you have a real estate agent working with you, you need to have them understand what number is going to get this house to sell within a few weeks. I don't care what it could sell for. That doesn't matter. I don't want to wait a year to sell my flip. What number will get my house to sell within a few weeks? And if they tell you that number, subtract maybe 20,000 off that number, and that's probably what that house is going to sell for in a week or two. So you got to be ultra conservative with your underwriting, and you need to factor in a lot of things. And another thing you got to look at in 2026, because the market's changed, is what's pending, what's actually moving. And then how long did that property take to go pending? Did it take a month? Did it take a week? Did it take 5 months? You got to pay attention to this stuff, because this is really what makes or breaks a deal, is understanding the market activity, the supply and demand, and the pricing, right? That's the third thing that's changed, is the actual market has shifted. Now, there are some markets in America that are buyers markets where there's just a ton of inventory there. And unless you're pricing way lower than everyone else, you're not going to stand out. But then there's also markets that are sellers markets still. The market still keeps appreciating. The properties keep selling for more money than they did the year before, most likely because of the supply and demand and how little microeconomics work. So you got to pay attention to that, and that's why I think it's really hard for people to do this business like nationwide unless they're wholesaling, because like, how do you really know what is going to sell? Like, you know what I mean? Like it's like very hard to like wake up on a Monday and do a deal in Texas, and then the next Tuesday do a deal in Alabama, and then Friday you're doing a deal in Oregon. Like it's hard to know because like every market is so different. So I think the local model is making a comeback. And that's actually my fourth thing on how real estate investing has changed, is that the local model is making a comeback. Now, just to give you some context, back in the day in 2015 and 2016, it was like, okay, you're local only, boots on the ground. And then all of a sudden, like 2018, 2019, and then obviously when COVID happened, it's like if you're going on an appointment, you were a knucklehead, right? It's like, oh my God, why would you ever go see the house when you can do it on your computer? And then it's like, okay, that made sense and that worked. And people got used to selling their houses through the telephone, which is kind of crazy if you think about it, but it happens every day. But now what I'm seeing is because of all the saturation and all the virtual people trying to invest in all these markets, the local model is making a comeback because sellers are getting screwed over by other investors. And people in Texas are trying to lock up houses in New York and they're not paying good prices, and then they're canceling, and then they're getting pissed, and then the seller wants to meet with somebody. So I think if you could get into a local model again and you can go out and see houses or send somebody to go out and see houses, a real estate agent, etc., you can have a big advantage because you know, like, and trust these people, and you could be boots on the ground, belly to belly with them, and you could build up that trust and credibility that will make you stand out. So I think you could still virtually wholesale deals. You can still virtually flip properties. That still works. I think it's gotten a little bit harder to do that because of the amount of competition. And the fact, if somebody's in Texas, they can turn on marketing anywhere and they can get leads anywhere. So I think the local model and going deep in your market is making a comeback. Who knows if it's a long comeback or not, but I have seen that trend. And then the last thing that has changed in 2026 is, this would be my fifth lesson or my fifth nugget here, is that it is getting regulated. The industry is getting regulated. And when I say the industry, I'm not even just talking about wholesaling. I'm talking about direct to seller marketing, especially wholesaling. But in my state, Washington, it doesn't even apply to wholesaling. It's getting regulated. So now what's happening is, because there's so much competition, and then the sellers have, really kind of gotten numb to the idea of a cash offer, and the market's changed, and the local model might be coming back. See how all those built on each other. It's getting regulated now. Now there's rules and regulations around dealing with homeowners directly. Like, for example, in my state where I live, you need to have a licensed agent involved in the transaction on the list side, or have a licensed agent involved on the buyer side, or have the seller get an appraisal that you pay for. And then they basically have, like, I think 2 weeks to cancel if the appraisal comes back higher than the cash offer. And if you don't do that, you can get in trouble. So what's happening is that, and that's just in Washington. Obviously, there's other regulations in other states, but the whole market's gotten so crazy, and real estate agents have gotten so pissed off about all these wholesalers fucking around. They've gotten regulation involved. Like, I believe in the state of South Carolina, not that I've ever done business down there, I think it's actually illegal, not giving you legal advice, to wholesale. I don't think you're allowed to wholesale in South Carolina, which is crazy. And I understand why, because there's so many dipshits out there doing the wrong thing. So not only do you have all these other things not working for you and shifting the market, you also have this whole kind of regulation, kind of black cloud hanging over the industry, which I think honestly needs a little bit of regulation, because the truth is, and I'm no genius, but there's a lot of dipshits in this business. There's a lot of dipshits and people who have bad intentions and scumbags, and unfortunately they ruin it for good people, because that's baseball. So the industry's changing, regulations coming in, and you need to understand local regulations. And that's another reason why it's like hard to do this thing in 5 different markets, because you might not know all the laws in that local market and you can get yourself in trouble. So that's another thing. That's the last thing that's changing. Now, I'm going to leave you on this note with, what can you do now to pivot and actually be successful? Because the market shifted. Guys are not doing as much business as they used to do, and there's an opportunity for them here to pivot so they can be more successful. Because I think this is what will happen if I had a crystal ball, which I don't. I think it's going to weed out a lot of bad actors. I think just the competition and the sellers being hard to deal with. And another thing is, you need to basically call the seller like 2 to 3 times more just to get a contract now than you used to. Like, you used to be able to have 1 or 2 phone calls with a seller. You get the paperwork signed, no problem. Now, I have like 3 houses I'm trying to buy right now. I've had to call each seller 15 to 20 times just to get them to commit. It's wild. It is wild, but that's baseball, and that's what happens in any sort of market. So what do you need to do to be better? Number one, you need to understand your local market. And in my opinion, you should be in no more than 3 markets. And you should only be in 3 markets if you have legitimate reasons to be there. So for example, in my situation, I live in Washington, so I'm local here. I grew up in New York, and I've been one of the biggest house buyers in that Hudson Valley area for 10 years. So I have a competitive advantage there. Just the fact that I go there a lot. I have a lot of connections, contractors, crews, vendors, referrals. Like, it makes sense to still be there, even though I don't live there full time. And then Delaware is where Brett lives. He's local. He's boots on the ground. And that's kind of a hybrid market because it's cheaper and, it can offset some of the bullshit we deal with on the coast. So that's why I'm in 3 areas. Now, if I had my druthers, I'd be in 1 market. But given the situations and whatnot, it makes sense to stay in 3. But you should cap out at 3 markets. You should no more than 3 markets. And if you really don't have a situation like me where it made sense in all 3 or makes sense in all 3, you should be in 1, maybe 2. If 1 is really hard, like if you're in San Francisco and you're like, oh my God, it's crazy here, maybe you go to the Midwest or something. But 2 to 3 markets, max. You need to understand those markets. You need to understand how competitive is it there? How much money is it going to cost to do a deal there? How much mail do you have to send, or how many PPC dollars do you have to spend? You need to really master these markets. What areas are good? What areas suck? Where do you want to spend your money, right? This is all stuff you need to know. You need to be an expert on real estate investing. You can't just be a sales expert anymore because that's going away. You need to be an expert on real estate and an expert on sales, right? So that's thing number 1. Thing number 2, you need to stand out with sellers, right? You need to stand out with sellers because they do know that they have options, and they're not just going to be some dumb seller who's going to take some dumb offer from somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. You need to actually talk to the seller, sit in their living room if you can, or do this over the phone, and get them to know, like, and trust you. So when the other people make offers, they don't want to sell to the other people because they like you best. You need to actually get back to the basics of building the rapport with people, or else you're going to have a hard time competing. Now, the third thing you got to do, you need to have multiple exit strategies. I think being a one-stop wholesale shop, and that wasn't supposed to rhyme, those days are gonzo. You need to be able to buy properties, especially with all the regulation with wholesaling. You need to understand what makes a good deal. If you're buying a house at a ridiculously cheap price, don't wholesale it. Don't sabotage a deal and risk somebody fucking going behind your back when you can just buy the house and close on it and throw it back on the market and make $100,000. It's crazy. So you need to be able to have 2 to 3 exit strategies on every deal. Flip, wholesale, rental, whatever it is. You need to have all these tools in your tool belt, or else it's going to be tough to compete. And if you get local, don't go more than 3 markets, you actually spend your time following up and building relationships with owners and showing them that you care and you want to solve their problem, and you have multiple exit strategies, and you know how to monetize these deals and solve these sellers' problems, you will have success in 2026. Now, you may have to work twice as hard to make half as much. That could be the case, and you wouldn't be the only one dealing with that. But that's the truth. That's the reality of this business in 2026. And this is what not a lot of people are talking about. I don't see a lot of people going on the internet like me and actually telling you the truth on what's happening. Not, oh, we're crushing it, my team locked up all this. Like, nobody cares about that bullshit because there's no value behind that. There's value behind sharing the truth and telling you what's actually happening in the business, because this is the only business that I do. I don't have a coaching program, right? I just do this business. That's it. And this is what I'm seeing. So hopefully you got value from this. This one was a little bit longer, but I feel like, if you stayed this long and you listened or watched it this far, you probably got some good value from that. If you did, as always, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with somebody else. And as always, if you're in the Seattle area, the Hudson Valley, or the state of Delaware, and you have a house you either want to wholesale to me, I'll be the buyer, or a house you want to wholesale with me, we can JV it. Send me an email, greg@velocityhousebuyers.com, or a DM on Instagram, and I'll see you on the next video. Take care.